The need for automation there is huge because at this scale, even a small lift in automation can unlock a huge amount of value. The logistics industries, the construction industry, the maritime industry are very heavy on physical assets. They might manage a fleet of trucks, a fleet of cabs. They might have hundreds of ships. They carry cargo. They move through different geographies and markets. They are heavily regulated and they often sit on terabytes and terabytes of data, and they're extremely cautious. The need for automation is huge because at this scale, even a small lift in automation can unlock a huge amount of value. We've delivered work in the maritime industry, heavily regulated, a lot of rules that everyone has to follow, a lot of reporting. The reporting is very manual as well.
We spoke with a prospect that had a fleet of trucks. They have people clocking in and out, maintaining, driving, refueling these trucks. They have this giant spreadsheet that goes out to column AF. Then there's 50,000 rows of data. If you think about how big their team is, they have 5 people per truck creating 5 data points every single day. You see what a monstrosity of a problem this is becoming. It's high complexity, but they're all strung together with a single Excel document. How nice it would be if they automated this and built an intelligent dashboard where we could build a very simple app that lets their workers clock in, clock out. That data comes to a centralized dashboard and you can derive very simple insights from this data. These builds aren't complex. What's challenging is knowing how to intelligently navigate this data.
It has very little to do with AI, a lot to do with just data management. A company mentioning that they had tried using those vibe coding tools and that these tools would not work at scale. After a few hundred rows would break. A vibe coded app is not a database. Focusing on the wrong thing will lead to failed projects internally. That's where we come in and develop very easy solutions for you that work at scale.
With these companies, there's a question of how to architect the right approach. Vibe coding is amazing and it's really empowered people to do a lot with these tools, but it doesn't address the core problem, which is that you're a proper enterprise and you have a lot of data that you need to work with. And you really need a competent partner that can actually clean that data, house that data, normalize it so that you can build something meaningful from it.
And do that in a way that works with your workforce as well. Your workforce might not be the most tech savvy, digitally native workforce, for example. They're already very busy and they don't want to have to learn a whole new thing. So it needs to adapt to their own ways of working. There oftentimes are questions around connectivity as well, especially in the maritime industry where a ship might not always have internet. That also raises questions around security, reliability and all that. These industries work at a scale that is so much bigger and they are also under the weight of very strong regulations. So all of that creates a specific environment that's difficult to navigate.
For these sorts of industries, my personal thesis is the best change management is one that's very under the hood. They can still conduct business as usual, but you get all of this lift from having a competent data analysis system.
For these types of companies, the reporting aspect of how the tool is being used is also hugely important. Building that in a way that captures user analytics, and if you're the project manager for this, you can report on it to your executives, to your bosses, in a way that's effectively communicating the benefits of it is also super important.
When you think about logistics, looking at your time spent working in maritime in particular, where do you feel like there's most resistance when it comes to adopting projects like this?
It comes from the top. You build a pilot, run it for many weeks, if not months, before the management, the decision-making layer will actually understand the benefits of the project and agree to signing a contract. It's proper enterprise sales in a very traditional environment. Another thing to take into account is those industries are very anxious about their fleet, their assets, because this is where most of the money is. You have to take that into account. You're not just capturing user data on a tool online, you're capturing real physical data, and that's also a whole thing.
I'd love to hear more about your experience as CEO of Sealanic. What did the company do and what results did you actually create for these companies?
The way you build a business case with these companies is, first of all, you have to go through a pilot. You can't expect to just sell something after a few discussions. You have to be prepared for that and you have to be here long term. The second thing is that you have to focus your pilot on having a clearly demonstrable ROI. So you have to know what to measure. You have to know how to measure it and at the right scale, because measuring it with just a few people in a 10,000 people organization is not going to work out. So you have to build that ROI, that business case. Then once once you have a demonstrable case presented to the decision makers, that's how you convert them. That's just half of the project, because once they see value in it, you can't expect to sell something to them that is prepackaged. So everything has to be custom, and so does the pricing. Oftentimes these industries are very tight-knit, and a lot of politics that have to be taken into account, a lot of hand-holding in the early stages of the process, and then you cannot expect that to just deliver and leave. You will be responsible for the adoption of the project. All of those things are hugely important when dealing with companies at that scale. If you do that well, you have a partner for life. You really are well placed to be embedded into these organizations and keep delivering for them with AI. There's a huge opportunity in doing that for logistics companies across the board, not just in the EU, but in many other markets.
What does a pilot look like? What are some easy use cases where we can automate something?
It has to do with data management. Building data systems that have a thin UI/UX/AI layer on top. Those are where you can create huge efficiency gains within these organizations. Before building an AI workforce or an AI sales team for these organizations, focus on building that foundational layer of healthy, clean data that can be leveraged in all sorts of ways. Then when you run your pilot, it's about having a very clear scope, try to find a vertical that's relevant to enough people, and spend a lot of time measuring. Where a lot of pilots fail is the partner will focus too much on the architecture and not enough on the measurement of progress and performance. You can build a great solution, but if you're not actually measuring how much time you're saving everyone when they interact with each feature you've built, and you're not able to translate that into real money, then you have lost already. A lot to do with data, but a lot more to do with project management, operations expertise, change management, and that's across many other industries as well.
The contrarian view is one does not need to modernize if you're in an old school industry because none of your peers are modernizing. What would you say to that?
I would say welcome to the EU, where every year you have a new piece of regulation that's just adding weight to your operations. Carbon credits is one thing in the maritime industry. Actually, it's not just in the maritime industry, it's also in any industry that pollutes. The EU is requiring you to report on so many things. You have to report on everything that's on your ship, how it got there and where it's going. The requirements don't just impact you as an organization, it impacts every step that happens before and after the journey, all the way to the last mile. It's not a question of, oh, I will be more competitive. It's a question of, if I don't do this, over time it's going to eat my lunch. We're not in software here. We're in very tight margins. And if you don't change over time, you just end up at zero. It's a very different game than the digital world.
In these industries that are capital heavy, labor heavy, thin margins, you have increasing regulation.
Any mistake you make or your workforce makes can cost you millions.
You have fewer and fewer places to look for margins. And so why not make a relatively small investment in some intelligence tool that can just help you make better decisions with the data that you have?
When it comes to these industries, the main concern of leadership is to lower risk. And having the right automation partner that can drive strategic projects in very specific areas of the business can do that for you. The less risk, the more predictability for these businesses, the better for management.